Benjamin Netanyahu has ordered the Israeli military to prepare to evacuate Rafah ahead of an expected invasion. This after U.S. President Joe Biden said he considered Israel's conduct in the war to be, quote, over the top. The U.S. administration officials joined the UN in warning Israel against expanding operations into Rafah, especially as hundreds of thousands of Palestinians have taken refuge along the southern Gaza border. Here's the U.S.'s National Security Council spokesperson, John Kirby.
Our view is any major military operation in Rafah at this time, under these circumstances, with more than 1 million, probably more like 1.5 million Palestinians who are seeking refuge and have been seeking refuge in Rafah, without due consideration for their safety, would be a disaster, and we would not support it.
Now, to understand this evolving situation politically, especially, Doug Herbert joining us on set, international affairs commentator. Well, the U.S. is ramping up its criticism. It's getting more and more explicit about what it wants and doesn't want from Israel in this war. More strains of the relationship as well. Where is this taking us?
You said more strains, right? Because this did not happen just yesterday. The strain in this relationship, U.S.-Israeli, has been building incrementally for months. I mean, in the very beginning, on the day and the days following the October 7th Hamas attacks on Israel, yes, the U.S. and much of the world threw its support behind Israel, unwavering, unstinting support, and reiterations of Israel's right to defend itself. I think at this point there are growing signs that the Biden administration, and many in Congress as well, are feeling jilted, are feeling betrayed, are feeling more and more frustrated at what they see as a close ally's failure to really, in any way, heed the advice. I'm not going to call it pressure campaign, but the advice and the pleadings of a very close ally, their closest ally, the United States, to do their best to take all care to avoid civilian casualties in Gaza, which now are over 27,000. Around 28,000 actually, as of today, and also to perhaps adhere or consider the pleadings for the war, what happens after the war, that is to consider a Palestinian state.
Is Israel going rogue for Washington?
It's not a matter of going rogue. Israel's basically, Netanyahu right now is, in the view of many observers, already a hardline approach towards the Palestinians, already, right, a very much in favor, under his watch, the settlements in the West Bank expanding. So it's hardly like he ever was going, gently into the night. But he is now more than ever, because Israel right now has its most far-right, ultra-nationalistic, conservative, religiously conservative government in history, in modern times, he is right now more than ever beholden to them. And that, in a sense, if he's even doubling down, in a sense, in what many already consider to be an extremely hardline prime minister when it comes to the relationship to the Palestinians. So it's not so much going rogue, but Israel is becoming more adamant and more hardline in an approach that it had already been adopting in recent years as Israeli society in general lurched and shifted more to the right. Well, now it's about as right as you can get under this government. Netanyahu has laid his chips there with this far-right government, and that has resulted in not just a strain, but an outright rejection of whether it's a ceasefire proposals, Hamas, and all that, the peace talks, which seem to be off for now, even though they're technically on, and also that rejection out of hand of a Palestinian state and those vows to fight on until victory with this offensive in Rafah looming, which the U.S. says categorically it's not going to support.
So, Doug, just a few minutes ago, earlier in the program, you and I were talking about Joe Biden's memory, and of course there is this reality of this far-right government in Israel, but is there also a kind of disregard growing? Could there be a link, in a sense, of an ally such as Israel not taking into consideration as much what's coming out of Joe Biden's mouth? Because, there's a little bit of a...
Look, what you're alluding to, Shona, is statements by the far-right minister, Ben Gvir, in this government, to the extent that he alluded that Biden also was in cognitive decline, and perhaps his policies didn't really reflect lucid, coherent thinking. Look, put that aside. This is coming from an extreme right minister who, even in his own government, in his own right-wing government, is controversial. That aside, Biden, you don't need statements from far-right Israeli prime ministers to see that Biden is in a bind over his approach to Israel's military operations in Gaza. This whole conflict. He's in a bind because the Democratic coalition that he cobbled together to use to win the election in 2020
It's falling apart over this over this
it's
issue.
unraveling. It was a young, progressive, often progressive, blacks, Latinos, minorities. It's unraveling, and more people now trust Trump, according to one recent poll, to handle the Israeli-Palestinian conflict than Biden. Young voters are the real defectors here. The younger generation tends to very much be in favor of the Palestinians, and not so much anti-Israeli, but anti-Biden's unstinting support of Israel at the expense of Palestinians. The youngest group, I'll just leave you with this, voters between 18 and 29, 3/4 of them look askance. That is, they do not support Biden's approach in his handling of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. That does not bode well for the election
And
in
even
November.
as he's saying that this war is over the top. Thank you so much, Douglas Herbert.